Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist, and today we're going to be doing a Reshef Lair of Darkness deck profile. So I'm really excited for this one because it's actually a Patreon request deck profile for Sienna. So Sienna actually asked me to make a deck based around Reshef and Lair, which this deck actually is really crazy and can do some really crazy stuff, and it summons one of the coolest monsters in the entire game that actually had an entire video game based around it in the form of Reshef the Dark Being. So this card is just really good in this deck. So without further ado guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell next so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below, just like Sienna did, for all those awesome rewards, like getting your name searched in a single video, getting a signed card to the mail, and even getting to request a deck profile every single month you're a patron, along with test hands. So without further ado, let's get straight on into this. So first off, you're going to be playing 3 copies of Reshef the Dark Being. So this card actually is super easy to summon in this particular deck and is a really awesome card. Use Final Ritual of the Ancients to summon this card. And basically its only effect is that you discard a spell from your hand and then take control of an opponent's monster until the end phase, which is pretty cool to be able to just take an opponent's monster away from them, especially with some of the tech cards that we're playing in this deck. We then play 2 copies of Darkest Diabolos. This card comes in super handy in this particular deck because of its effect to revive itself, because it has the ability that your opponent cannot tribute this card on your side of the field, and it cannot be targeted by your opponent's card effects either, and it has the ability also that if a dark monster you control is tributed, except during the damage step, then you can special summon this card from your graveyard or your hand, which is really cool. You can also tribute a dark monster, and then you can place 1 card from your opponent's hand on either the top or the bottom of their deck, which is a pretty good effect, especially if they've just searched and they only have like 1 card. This card can really help out. We then play 3 copies of Danger Bigfoot. So Danger Bigfoot is another level 8 monster in this deck. You basically play a bunch of level 8s in here to help you get out your copy of your Reshef. But if you guys are unfamiliar with what Danger monsters do, all Danger monsters share the ability that you reveal them in your hand, your opponent randomly picks a card in your hand and discards it to the graveyard. If the discarded card was not the Danger monster that you revealed, you get to special summon that Danger monster and then draw a card. Then all of your Danger monsters share a unique effect, and Danger Bigfoot's unique effect is if this card is discarded, then you get to target a card on your opponent controls and destroy it, which is pretty good just to give you some spot removal as well, with a card like this being a level 8 as well. We then play 3 copies of Lava Golem, which is my surprise tech of this deck. Lava Golem is really insanely good in this deck because at the beginning of your turn, if you're going second, which this deck plays very well going second, you can actually out just about any single board with this card, because basically what you're going to do is just tribute 2 of your opponent's monsters with the Lava Golem, summon out your copy of your Reshef, and then once you summon out your copy of your Reshef to your side of the field, discard any spell card and take control of that Lava Golem and do 5,500 damage to your opponent, and then give the Lava Golem back to your opponent at end phase, and it does an additional 1,000 at the beginning of their turn, which is really cool. And combo with something like Eradicator Epidemic, you can actually tribute the copy of Lava Golem while Lair is on the field to be able to call spells or traps and stop your opponent. So this card comes in really clutch and really helpful. We then play 3 copies of Arima. Arima just discards itself and then lets you add Lair from your deck to your hand. If it's on the field, you can tribute a dark monster to draw a card, or if you tributed a dark monster other than this card to activate this card's effect, you get to add a dark monster with 2,000 or more defense from your deck to your hand, which is usually going to be your Darkest Diabolos that you're going to be grabbing with this effect. Since it is a ritual deck, we're also playing 3 copies of Manju of the 10,000 Hands, because you can actually normal summon this card to grab the ritual spell for Reshef, or the actual Reshef itself, which is really helpful for this particular deck, just to grab those certain cards. So that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's get into the spells. So for the spells, we're going to be playing 2 copies of Enemy Controller. Enemy Controller is really helpful in this deck with your copies of your Reshef, because basically this card lets you target a face-up monster your opponent controls, change its battle position, or tribute a monster, and then target a monster your opponent controls and take control of that card. So this card's really cool to actually tech into a deck like this that just basically deals and outs boards just over and over again. We then play 3 copies of Final Ritual of the Ancients. Final Ritual of the Ancients is the ritual spell that you actually use to summon your Reshef. It just takes level 8, or takes 8 or more stars to actually tribute to summon your Reshef, which is fine. You play a lot of level 8s in this deck, so you have a lot of targets to actually use with this. You can either use 2 4s or an 8 to actually summon out your copy of Reshef. It's very easy to summon in this deck, which you guys will see in the test hands. We play 3 copies of Allure of Darkness just to give you a little bit more draw power, because you play plenty of darks in the deck to actually play this card. Unfortunately, Reshef is for some reason a light monster, so you kind of got to watch out for that. But you play the Danger Bigfoot, you play the Arimas, and you play the Darkest Diabolos, so you have about 8 targets in the main deck to actually play around with this card. So you have plenty of targets targets to actually make this card go off. We play 3 copies of Trade-In as well. The 3 copies of Trade-In is because you play so many level 8 monsters in this deck. It's just really easy to use the Trade-In to help you draw deeper into the deck to get your plays rolling. We play 3 copies of Super Polymerization. It is a Lair of Darkness build, so the Super Polys come in really handy in this deck to be able to just out your opponent's board. It doesn't matter what they have, you just discard a card and then Super Poly their monsters away, and it gives you a Starved Mid Infusion Dragon, which is great. We play 3 copies of Lair of Darkness. Lair of Darkness is an insanely good card in this deck because all face-up monsters on the field become dark, and then once per turn, if you would tribute a monster's, if you control it, for a card effect, you contribute a monster that your opponent controls that's a dark monster, and since this makes everything dark, you contribute any of your opponent's monsters to activate a monster effect or any effect that requires a tribute, which is really cool, except for the ritual spell. I really like that effect to be able to do that, and also it has the ability that once per turn during the end phase, you special summon torment tokens to either player's field of the turn player equal to the amount of cards that were tributed. So for example, if I tribute 2 monsters during my turn, I get 2 torment tokens. If I tribute 2 monsters during my opponent's turn, they get 2 torment tokens during the end phase that go into defense position as 1,000 level 3s, which helps you out with link plays actually. We then play 3 copies of Pre-Preparation of Rites. Pre-Prep of Rites is really good because it lets you add a ritual spell from your deck to your hand and a ritual monster that specifically lists on the ritual spell, which is pretty cool because you can actually add the final Ritual of the Ancients and your Reshef to your hand off this card. This card is always great to see in your hand when you draw it. So that's it for the spells, guys. Let's get into the traps. So for the traps, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Eradicator Epidemic. Eradicator Epidemic is just so good in Lair. It's like, it'd be crazy not to play this card, because once you have Lair on the field, you can actually tribute your opponent's monsters with this card, which is just really good. You tribute a dark monster with 2,500 or more attack, and then you call spells or traps. And then for the next 3 turns, you get to look at every card that your opponent draws and the cards on their field, and you destroy the chosen type, either spells or traps, which is really good. I really like that effect, and this card can just be completely devastating against your opponent. So that's it for the main deck, guys. Let's get into the extra deck. So for the extra deck, we're going to be playing a single copy of Beat Cop of the Underworld. This card is really good in Lair because this card just requires 2 monsters, so you can actually use the Torment tokens to summon this card, and it has the ability that you get to treat a monster and then target one face-up monster on the field and place a patrol counter on it, and you can only use effect this card once per turn. If this card would be, if you have a patrol counter on a card, would be destroyed by battle or by card effect, you can remove patrol counter from it instead. This card's really good to use the Torment tokens to actually go into it, and it can actually tribute your opponent's monsters as well if you have Lair out, which is pretty good. 1 copy of Verte Anaconda. You don't play Dragoons, but you do play Super Poly, so you play this card as a 1 of in here just to help out with the Super Poly plays. Play the same copy of IP Masquerena because IP Masquerena is also very easy to link into with your Torment tokens. 1 copy of Cerberus to pop monsters. 1 copy of Phoenix to pop spells and traps. 1 copy of Unicorn because it spins stuff, and then a single copy of Borolo Dragon. The Borolo Dragon is a substitute. You can play Access Code in this position if you have Access Code, but I wanted to do something a little bit different for you guys, so I actually included the Borolo. You can play Borolo, Boral Sword, or Access Code. It's totally up to you. I really liked playing the Borolo because it can actually take your opponent's monsters, so it kind of went with the theme of the deck to actually play the Borolo over the Access Code for this particular deck, and it's really funny to actually just use your Sheaf to take opponent's monsters, and this too to actually take opponent's monsters. And you actually go into this every so often, but you don't play all that much in the extra deck. Play a single copy of Starved Mid Infusion Dragon, which is our best Super Poly target because it's really easy to summon in this deck, and it just basically takes 2 dark monsters that are currently on the field, so this card is super easy to summon to your field. 1 copy of the Predaplant that takes 3 monsters to summon it. This card is if your opponent has more monsters than the Starving Venom, so this card is really good to actually go into as well with Super Poly. 1 copy of Mud Dragon because this card basically is a catch-all. It just takes 2 monsters with the same attribute but different types. This card basically just catches everything else that these 2 don't for your Super Poly targets, which is kind of cool. 1 copy of number 97. You play so many level 8s in this deck, this card really helps you out to OTK your opponent because it actually lets you detach 2 materials from this card, or detach a material from this card, and then take 2 number dragon monsters with the same, with different names from your extra deck, and then you special summon both of them to your field, and then take 1 and overlay it on top of the other one, so it's kind of cool that it can basically throw out any XZ dragon monster, which is kind of neat. Play a single copy of number 100 because you use this card with number 97, and this card can come out to a 10,000 beat stick, which is really cool. We play a single copy of number 38 because number 38 eats spell cards, which is kind of cool. 1 copy of number 92. These cards are all cards that you can summon off your number 97, which is kind of cool. And I really wanted to play the Heart Earth Dragon. Number 92 is just so good because it can't be destroyed by battle. and your opponent takes any battle damage from battles you would have taken involving this card, which is just automatically a really good effect. It also has the ability that during your opponent's end phase, you can detach a material from this card to banish all cards your opponent currently controls that were normal or special summon or that were set this turn. And if this card is destroyed while it has Exi materials, then you can special summon this card from your graveyard, and then it gains 1,000 attack for every card currently banished, which, since it wasn't technically properly summoned, it won't be able to do that last effect. But the other effects to be able to detach to banish stuff still goes off. We then play a single copy of number 60. The number 60 does come in handy sometimes. You do rarely summon it, but to draw 2 and discard 1 comes in handy, and to double the attack of a monster also comes in handy sometimes. So I figured why not play it as a one-of in this particular deck. So that's it for the Reshef Lair of Darkness deck, guys. I hope you enjoyed. It's a really fun deck to play around with. I really enjoyed the process of making this deck because it's a really cool deck the way that it's come out. Because you're using an old school ritual monster in the form of Reshef, and you're actually using a new engine, which is your Lair of Darkness, that basically just tears through your opponent's monsters. The only thing that's the downside about this deck is Lair of Darkness does say that you contribute to your opponent's monsters as if you would control them, but the way that ritual work cards are actually worded, you can't use them for the ritual spell cost, which would be a little bit overpowered. So the deck still works really well with all the other tribute cards, but that's the only downside. So anyways, guys, this is DarkArmedDuelist. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can come part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below, and give Sienna some love down in the comments down below as well for requesting this awesome deck, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.